ask for the courtesy of the board members, staff, and members of the public, if you could please silence your cell phones. Good morning and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled today, Tuesday, June 9th, 2026, for the purpose of discussing policy IA student progression plan. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because this is not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken and there will be no open public comment period in which the public normally addresses the school board on relevant topics that are related to the work of the board. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Members Byrd, Ferrand, Douglas, Vanos are here. I believe Member Feller will be joining us shortly, and Member Gallo is calling in. Chair Jacobs will be absent. As a reminder, the board members will not engage in outside electronic or digital communication during the meeting, so we may focus on the matters immediately before us. To my fellow board members and district staff, when speaking, please make sure your microphone is turned on and speak directly into it so our YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly, especially the ones up there. Those are really difficult to hear. Thank you again so much for participating in today's meeting. We will now pause for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Pomerini. I will now turn it over to Dr. Vasquez to get us started today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. We will be doing our annual review of the student progression plan. Ahead of time, I want to thank Dr. Bridges and her team who have really worked very hard to make this policy and its components as easy to understand as possible. It's quite a lengthy policy. Also to Ms. Kopesky for her help in making us or helping us be as clear as possible without being too wordy. I know that's difficult for an attorney. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Kopesky.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Good morning, board. Thank you for being with us today. If I could have video services, please project our screen on there. Thank you. As Dr. Vasquez mentioned, we'll be reviewing policy IA, which is a student progression plan. With me today is Carla Owen. She is our Director of Academic Services for K through 8, as well as Mary Bridges, which I know you all know her very well. So we'll get started with the timeline. Before today, we have presented to Cabinet on May 4th. We also met with all the board members and provided additional information last week and some research that we had done, answering some questions that you all had in our individual meetings. We've also met with individual departments, received their input, and we reviewed all the legislative updates and added those to the student progression plan so long as they've been adopted at this point. So we are here today at the work session. We tentatively have another work session scheduled for June 25th, should there be additional changes out of this work session and we need to bring it back. And then we're looking for board approval on July 28th, so that way the student progression plan can be in effect on the first day of the 26-27 school year, which is August 11th, 2026. And we are going to get started with our 50% rule because I know that that's a big topic of conversation with the board. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Owens to walk you through that.
Good morning. Today we have the student progression plan, the 50% policy. As you will see on the PowerPoint, we do have the current language and we have also provided proposed language for the 2026-2027 50% policy. This proposed language states while students may receive less than 50% on individual assignments and/or classroom assessments, the grading period average will not fall below 50% for the following grading periods. And we've listed the grading periods here. We also have discussed with several board members different things as far as whether we are keeping the 50% policy as well as changing the actual proposed language that is here. That was a suggestion from one of the board members. We wanted to also discuss, if possible, the next slide, which is the 50% calculation example that is provided for you. Here we have two scenarios where the 50% calculation is included in scenario A, and in scenario B, we do not have the 50% calculation included. As you can see from this chart, we have quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, where they are, quarter 1, 3, and 4, where the grades are the same. However, in quarter 2, we have chosen to show you that scenario A has the 50% policy and scenario B does not. With that calculation of scenario A, the final average would be a C. With the scenario B, where there is no 50% calculation, the final grade would be an F. We also have additional examples using the 50% policy that was provided to board members earlier, I believe last week. If you would like for me to go over that, I would be happy to do that as well.
Yes, let's take a pause. I have two board members who would like to speak to this. Member Front.
Thank you, and thank you for providing the different scenarios. I don't know that this really really describes it well, because when I speak with parents, or really especially teachers, the frustration is that a student could receive do really great their first quarter, get a 96, a 98, and then slack off the next few quarters. And as long as they get a 50, that 50%, they can still pass. So my issue is that I just really want to hold students accountable to really pushing through and getting that high achieving. So while it looks here like maybe in quarter 2, the child, maybe they were sick or maybe something happened, but typically even if you're sick, you're still handing in work or you're trying, right? You're trying to accomplish something. A 0 is like you've literally not tried. And that's the frustration that I hear so much from teachers and then other students who say, I have literally been trying so hard all quarter. I turn work in, and while maybe they aren't, maybe they're more of getting the 70% or things like that, even though they're trying hard. They look at the kid next to them who literally comes to school and could care less if he's there or doesn't come half the time, and then still is receiving that 50%, even though he's not turning any work in hopes that we can get him passing the class. So I'm in favor of giving zeros because I think we need to hold students accountable. If they don't want to do their work, they may not pass that class then, and they may have to retake it. That would make a child question, okay, do I really want to do that, or do I want to just work hard and get it done? It also gives some backup to parents who want to, push on their kid, like, hey, you've got to get this work done. As I spoke with a parent who told me that their child just kind of checked out because they had realized that as long as they had done good in a few quarters, they could check out 1 or 2 quarters and still pass the class. So that's not what we really want to see here in Orange County Public Schools. We really want to see excellence in the classroom. So I am in favor of zeros if the child is not, handing in their work, or we're not just giving out zeros for fun, but like if they're not doing their work, I think they should get what they're doing. You know what I mean? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Front. Member Byrd.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the information that you sent out with all of the different scenarios and showing, the positives and the negatives. And, I've read a lot about this. I understand it. I understand the thinking behind it. I do also, though, share the concern, and this is where our strategic plan and our portrait of a graduate comes into play, because we've talked about, when we were creating our strategic plan, these next 5 years really focusing on these soft skills, right? And making kids graduate so that they're ready to, handle the workforce, or, responding to things we've heard from employers. And one thing that I hear a lot from industry professionals and from the workforce is that the kids are coming to them, not just from us, but just in general, like unable to meet deadlines, kind of wanting things on their timelines, and being a little more, I don't know how to phrase it really, but not as driven for meeting your expectations. It's more about what their expectations. So we talked a lot about, when we were creating the strategic plan, figuring out how to address that and how to make kids more responsible, I guess, basically. So this is one area that I think that, as much as I understand the reasoning behind it, that we may have to just adjust our thinking. I'm kind of in favor of it, but then also I am also not the expert, and I feel like sometimes the board, gets into the weeds on this, and I trust the superintendent's judgment and the staff's judgment on this. And I feel like the language that you came up with here is a good compromise. Individual assignments can be less than 0. But then when I look at this scenario A, scenario B, and I'm thinking, if this is my child, right, they've made a C the first 9 weeks, and then the second 9 weeks, for whatever reason, they decided they're just gonna slack and not turn in their assignments, and then I would expect that third quarter they would do better than a C. I would like to see, like what happens if they got a B or an A, and I can figure that out, but I just thought of that just now. That they would have to really work hard. And as Member Ferrant said too, there is this sense of, okay, well, I'm going to fail. I'm going to have to take this course all over again. Like when I was growing up, that's how it was. Like oh my God, I can't fail geometry. I'm going to have to take this course all over again. And I remember, and I say geometry because it was the only course I ever got a D in, and it was the word. I hated geometry, and I was an algebra girl, not a geometry girl, and I'll never forget, because my father was a contractor, and so he lived with geometry, and he never understood how I didn't understand it. But anyway, I made a D, I remember, 9 weeks, and then it was like the second 9 weeks, and I mean that next 2 quarters worked my tail off to get higher grade, because I didn't want to have to take that class again because I hated it so much. But this is all about teaching, like personal responsibility. And that is part of what we're really trying to focus on these next 5 years. So I have concerns about it. But again, this is another one of those things where I kind of want to, really hear the superintendent's I will trust staff on this. I really will, and you guys are the experts. I'm just expressing to you that I do think that we have to move towards a little more accountability on students' end, so that they can, because that's just what I keep hearing from professionals. Thank you.
Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out in this example, the first scenario, the child passed 3 out of the 4 quarters and ends up with a D, right? I mean, a C, 69.5. It can be same exact scenario. They pass 3 out of the 4 quarters. They end up failing the class. So I think that it is definitely something that is emotional. And I do believe that we have some students that are not turning anything in. And for those students, they are not going to pass. If they're consistently not turning anything in, they're getting zeros, they're not going to end up passing the class. For those children, and we talk about mental health, we talk about the issues these children are facing with immigration, the affordability issues. They're coming to school with a lot on their plate where they may be struggling academically a semester, or maybe they're not able to do their assignments because mom is working at home, mom is working in the evening, they're taking care of the siblings, they don't have time to do it. So I will defer to the board because I do know that this is a very difficult topic. I personally believe it's unfair that if you have a child that has passed 3 out of the 9 weeks, they end up failing the course.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Member Gallo on the line.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am in agreement with Member Byrd. First off, I wasn't good in geometry either. I was better in algebra, so shout out to all the people who are better in algebra. But I understand why we do this, and I understand how it really does help students. I guess my concern is twofold. Number one is that students understand the system, right? So I'm more worried about those. The students that need that extra help and that are struggling, I obviously want to provide as much help to those students as we can because we want to ensure that they're successful as well. I am concerned about the students who use it to their advantage. And I'm also concerned about the inflation of grades. I'm concerned that, like, as a parent, when my kids were going through school, I looked at their report cards. And based on the grades on the report cards, I anticipated how well they would do on the final exams, how they would do on the FCAT, which is what they received back then, how well they would do on AP final exams. I mean, their grades was an indication of me of mastery of the subject. And so when I had a daughter who I was told wasn't going to pass the FCAT in 3rd grade, and I'm looking at her grades and she's on the AB honor roll, my first question was, how can she be on the AB honor roll if you don't believe she's going to pass the FCAT? So my concern is for parents like myself who are having conversations with teachers, who are looking at the report card. I just believe that it provides an inflated sense of security that my kid is learning when in some cases they're not. They're not mastering that topic or that subject, and they're not going to pass an EOC, or they're not going to pass, the CFE or the final exam, and they haven't really had a mastery of the subject. So if someone could help explain to me how we ensure that kids are mastering the content and the standards that we're providing, then I might feel a little bit better about that, but those are my concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Gallo. Member Vanos, I don't know if there was folks who wanted to talk about that first. Yeah,
So again, grading is a very individual act. Some teachers count everything, some only count tests, some have same weights for everything. So really there's no way for us to guarantee that the grades are reflecting the learning. We trust that our teachers are the instructional experts. We monitor through the assessments that are given throughout the year. And so those are when the first progress monitoring from the state comes out, and we compare students maybe that are doing very well, but they're failing a course. We would want to see why is that happening, and the same is true vice versa. If a child is on the honor roll and their progress monitoring comes back, we would want to delve into that discrepancy. But we do not have the authority to institute a system of grading that guarantees that those grades are equitable and that they're reflective of what that child knows. Because sometimes a child may take a test and they're not feeling well, or they don't want to try, or there could be other aspects and they don't do well, but the work that they've done throughout that chapter or that unit shows that they do master the content. So my best response is that we look at the formative assessments that are given. Principals and assistant principals monitor the grades each quarter, identifying specifically students who maybe are in intervention groups, students that are failing, and they look into why that is happening. So that's the best response I can give. Not something that would give you a lot of assurance, but it's the best that we have right now.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Member Vanos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the points that have been raised by Member Front, Member Byrd, Member Gallo about just wanting to make sure that our students have sort of those like organization, executive functioning, accountability, responsibility skills. But so I do share that. I will also say that I have come completely around on this issue. The 0 to 50% as an F grading scale, I just don't think makes sense. I think one of the problems is that the 0 to 100 scale just doesn't align with what we're doing. So I'm wondering, can we change the scale to like a 1 through 5 instead of, so that it's just better aligns with what we're trying to accomplish? I'm just asking if it's possible.
No, we've actually had conversations about that many years ago. Even at the elementary level, there were schools that had that rating scale, and there was a rubric that was tied to it. Some of the schools did portfolio assessments. I'm not sure if the state has put any legislation in regarding what the grading scale is. That would be the biggest obstacle. But if we had the flexibility, my recommendation would be that we work with the Classroom Teachers Association. That's going to require some training, but that is a much more equitable rating scale because the differential is the same as opposed to what you pointed out, 0 to 50.
Okay, thank you. I think personally, I would be in favor of just looking into that and seeing if it is possible and what our teachers think about it, what the CTA thinks about it. And the reason I support that is I do share some of the concerns. I think some of our students really do struggle with turning things, being on time, realizing that there's deadlines. So I see that, and I wish there was a way that could also be evaluated separately from mastery of content, because mastery of content doesn't always, to me, I don't really care if a student doesn't turn in homework if at the end of the year they get a 5 on the AP or they pass the EOC, or you know what I mean? What matters is that they understand the content. So for me, the homework piece just isn't that important. So that's also kind of factoring into my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Vanos. I'm queued up next. This is one that also is really difficult, as folks have said. The math is just really hard when you have one letter grade that is 0 through 50 and every other letter grade is only 10 points. It just messes up the mathematical average. It's just how it works. And so as a student, I remember some teachers being incredibly difficult with grading. And if you got a C or lower in the class, crawling out of that, it is so hard to do that. And 9 weeks really is in the lifespan of life of so many of our students. So many things can happen in just 9 weeks, and there were times in my AP classes where I messed up entire quarters because of stuff that was going on with family, and it was immigration, and it was my parents' health, and it was me just missing entire tests. That there were some teachers that had, you can't really make up a test if it's not the right kind of head start and stuff, and crawling back from a 0 on an average is really difficult. I did have classes where I mastered the material and passed the AP exam with a 4 or 5 and got C's. I got one class where I passed the AP, I'll be explicit, AP Calc BC. I passed the AP exam with a 4 and I got a D in the class. And that was purely on not turning in my homework. But it was senior year. My parents had just lost their house in the 2008 crisis. I was literally homeless senior year. And I wasn't doing my math homework because I thought it was wasteful time. Like, I had so much better things to do at home. Like, back in the day, my mom was doing some, like, cleaning of banks at night. It was, like, 11 p.m. shift, and I would go with her, and I would help her. So, like, if I had the choice as a student to help my mom get some extra jobs, and I did, I wasn't going to do my math homework, and I didn't. And if you could look it up, my transcript, I have a D in AP Calc my senior year. And I had nothing to do with mastery. And then I see some other students and peers from, like, that really worked so hard on the day-to-day assignments and worksheets and homeworks, and they were just never going to do well on that test. But they actually did have the life skills of going home and studying and doing the homework and turning in the work. And maybe they didn't pass back in the day the FCAT or didn't get a really high level on that, but they had the life skills of, like, it's important to do your homework, it's important to have discipline, it's important to submit your work. And so, like, it feels like it's all a little bit misaligned on incentives. I think when a student gets a 0 and a quarter, there's a much bigger question to me rather than, like, is that fair to everybody else? And I think right now we just have a lot going on in students' and families' life, and I understand how it can be unfair, but we have such an uneven way. Every teacher grades so differently that it is, like, if it was, like, grading was more standardized or grading was more specific, then, like, maybe there would be even a fair shot of being more equitable, but I don't believe it is equitable. And one of the few tools that we do have at the policy level is to make sure that these students that are getting zeros have some buffer beyond just what is happening between them and the classroom and them and their lives. And so I'm perfectly okay with keeping this. I would love, as Member Vano say, exploring the concept of, like, the 1 through 5. I think I remember that being in elementary school and it being a great system, but I just have a hard time. I know people really feel strongly about this. I get a lot of emails on that. But as a student, honestly, if I don't remember if there was a buffer back in the day, but I mean, it was like you would just get a D in the class regardless of mastery. It just didn't matter. If a teacher felt like you were disrespecting them or you didn't take their assignment seriously, it just was what it was. You got a 0, and I got zeros for quarters. And I had to explain that to colleges in, like, different ways, and sometimes they understand, sometimes they don't. But if a student is in a mental state where they are getting a 0 and a quarter, and they don't see a way out of that 0 or that F, I assure you they're not going to come back even with a C the rest of the quarter. Like, why even try if you know you got a 0 and it automatically puts you so far below that it doesn't make you want to try more to get back up when it's so hard on the average. And so I don't even think you would get that scenario where a student comes back to get a C. I think a student would just say, the math is never going to come back for me, so I just will stop trying. So you're just in that state of mind where everything's so much more important than whatever this grade tells you. That's, like, my experience. Member Douglas.
I also agree with Member Vanos. If we can find a more equitable way to grade, it will be fine. I'm sure there's something better than this. Otherwise, I would like to keep the 50%. However, I would like to make sure that the teachers have a discretion to give a 0, depending on the student, because they are the one who know the child. Do they ever come to school? And that was my big issue when I was a teacher. There was a student that was struggling by working so hard to accomplish and get a 50%. And then you have this kid that never comes to school. I'm telling you, it just never comes to school and have exactly the same grade as the one that struggled. That is my issue. It's always been the issues that I had things at 50%, and I didn't feel like it was fair for some of the students, so I had to bump up the students that, that deserved a 50%, but I would have to give him a 65% because I saw that the other kids never come to school and get a 50. So it was juggling for teachers in my mind. It's not fair to the teachers, and it's not fair to the students. So if we can find a more equitable way, I am for it, and that will also, if we give a 0 to a student who's always absent, maybe that will encourage him to come back to school and reduce the student absence in schools. Because if you let them do whatever they want, then yes, we're going to have a problem with truancy. Okay, so that's another problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Douglas. Member Felder.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Teaching and learning is very personal. And there's no way a teacher will come into a classroom and not be personable about what they're teaching and about their children. I struggled with students, even when I was a student in high school in the 70s. We had students in my class of 1974, that were taking hard courses, physics, physiology, and I hated geometry too, but all of those courses, and they were doing very well. Then we had another student in my class who they were taking, most of their schedule was vocational, and they got to be the valedictorian. I'm still mad about that. However, that person that was taking the vocation courses, they did very well, and they had all A's. My point is this: when one of the, I can't remember which one of the board members said something about you're doing well, making A's, and then you take a standardized test. This person did not do well at all on a standardized test. But they had a 4.0 back then. We were on a 4-point scale. They had a 4.0. And then you have some students that were maybe with a 3.5, 3.6, but on the SAT, they used to have the senior test. The highest score you can make is 500. One chick made 499 or something. But they weren't the val. You understand what I'm saying? So it is a struggle. So that's what I mean when I say teaching and learning is very personable. And it's going to be hard work because it is frustrating to a parent, because I've had them talk to me when their child is getting all these A's and B's, and then when you tell them they can't pass the FCAT or they can't pass, they're not doing well on the standardized test. And we've done all kinds of things in this district to kind of help students who are not good test takers to still get over that hump so they can graduate. I'm sharing something very personal. I was preparing to enter the grad school. You have to take the GRE. I remember writing a very long letter to the test people that were going to issue that test to me about why I wasn't a good test taker and what I could do academically in the classroom. And I mean, it was very long. I had people help me write the letter because I knew that I was not a great test taker. But I was able to get in graduate school. That was back in the day. I was able to get in graduate school because I could prove to them that you can't judge my ability to learn and succeed on one test for 3 hours. You can't do that. But again, we're living in a society where people are judged by their ability or inability to communicate effectively what we think is not only the spoken word, but the written word. You have to be able to do this so people can deem that you are intelligent. This thing about the grading, as Member Douglas has said, as a teacher in the classroom, you do feel for those students who are struggling. And that very poignant story you shared with us, Board Member Salamanca, about working with your parents. The choice would be to work with your parents because you have nowhere to live, and you see your parents working to try to get more money so you can live. So you're not going to do Not going to read Shakespeare. Not going to read Romeo and Juliet tonight. That's not on your mind. You understand? That's not on your mind. However, that's a requirement. If you're in an AP class, you need to know that. If you're in an honors class, if you're in a regular class, you need to have the basic understanding of Shakespeare's tragedies, a romantic tragedy in the case of Romeo and Juliet. So what do? I think that the word here would have to be flexibility, because we have to look at both sides. And it is very disturbing. And I think Member Vanna, she said something about the 1 through 5. Maybe we do need to reevaluate, look back at that for our students, because we have to set a certain precedence as educators. There's certain things you must know, you must learn. However, we have to, this is hard work. It is not easy being an educator. It is not easy becoming a teacher, because you got varying personalities with children and parents, and you got a schedule that you got to follow. In 2 weeks, you're supposed to be on this, 3 weeks, you're supposed to be on that. I never followed that schedule. I followed the schedule my students put me on based on their ability to learn. So a lot of times I never completed whatever that thing was. But they were learning, and I could test them on the material that I gave them, and they did well. So I think, ladies, and we may have this is a conversation I think will probably be ongoing because of the society in which we live in, and how we think and what we do, and how important education and how important learning is. Because there's a difference. We try to make it the same. There's a difference. We have to decide how we're going to juggle that and still have some means of success. And we can't hurry up and do this. We cannot microwave this. People, society would try to tell us this, but this is what we do. Public education is what we do. Took them 150 years to get to this point, 150 plus years. So I'm enjoying the conversation and listening to the ideas that board members are suggesting, and it is my hope that we will listen and we will work through this thing gingerly, because this is not a hurry up and fix thing. Because trends change every year. Educational trends change every year. And people's ideas about what is a good education or what is not a good education changes every year. But we must be at the top of our game to make sure that our students are prepared for the world that they're living in, and they would have some minimum of success. I know I said a lot, but that's my thought, and I will always see this as a continual process. I will. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Felder. Member Ferrand.
Thank you. This is definitely an interesting topic, because I think it is very individualized, where there are students who maybe are struggling, have family issues or things going on at home, or maybe they're not feeling well. So I just go back to the teacher that told a student, okay, you got 92 your first quarter. Literally, as long as you got anything over a 90, you could coast the next three quarters and you'll pass the class. That's what I struggle with. I just don't want to have our students being mediocre when we really want to call them to excellence. I really love the idea of doing the mastery, because mastery is really, isn't that why we're here? It's not about getting an A on a test. It's about really understanding the material. That sounds like it's going to be a bigger task than this summer and getting this passed. So maybe something that we could consider and talk about this year as we progress throughout the year, and really talk that through of how would that look? Could we convert to that? I think that makes a lot more sense. And it also can show that progress. It's like progress monitoring in a sense, how we're doing that the 3 times a year, and it kind of helps us see, okay, are the students actually learning? Are they progressing? If they're getting a two, and then that third quarter they're getting a 4, and by the last quarter they have a 4 or 5, well then yes, I feel they've mastered it and they're great. But again, it's different than the norm, so we'd have to really discuss that one. Just looking, I've been like over here crunching numbers, trying to figure out how to, because really if a student were to receive a 90 their first quarter and then check out and they get the 50%, 50-50, those last 3, they still come out with a 60% and they pass. Could we switch it to like 25%? Because even seeing that, so I calculated it kind of in that same averaging. I don't know if that would be better, or I just think there's got to be something, because we can't just continue. And then if we leave it up to the teacher, could there be accusations of discrimination, or you're picking favorites? But something really does have to happen, because teachers are frustrated with it, parents are, and students are. And really the only kids that are benefiting from this with the 50% is really kids who aren't doing anything, and it just helps them shuffle through being mediocre. And like Member Byrd said, our goal is to make sure that students are graduating ready for to be productive members of society and helpful members of our workforce, and we need to really hold them to that standard of excellence.
Thank you, Member Ferrand. Mr. Palmerini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's a statute that deals with grading scales. It's 1003.437. And it says for grades 6 through 12, the grading system and interpretation of letter grades shall be as follows. A, 90 to 100, has a grade point value of 4 and is defined as outstanding progress, and it goes down. B is 80 through 89, C 70 through 79, D 60 through 69, F 0 through 59. And it goes down each one and assigns 4 points to an A, 3 points to a B, 2 points to a C, 1 point to a D, and 0 to an F. So it prescribes how we grade in the state, because back in the day, various districts had various grading scales. I remember when I was in school here, a grade of an A was a 94 to 100, and it was 85 to 93 was a B. And so there was differences throughout the state, and the state said, we need to know what a grade means from district to district. That's why we're implementing a uniform scale. So there also has been an amendment to this statute in House Bill 1279. And so some of this may be taken out of our hands. It says, the State Board of Education shall establish a statewide uniform weighted grading system for honors courses and articulated acceleration mechanisms identified in Section 1007.27. District school boards shall use the weighted grading system to calculate the weighted high school grade point averages. So we are going to get something from the state in a State Board of Education rule that's going to dictate to us what the weighted grading system is going to be, and we will most certainly have to use that. Now, with respect to whether or not, instead of reflecting, 90 through 100 as an A and using 4, 3, 2, 1, my understanding is the team has looked at it, and other districts around the state do utilize 4 for an A, 3 for, so if you have the first 9 weeks, your grade is an A, you get a 4. Your second 9 weeks, no matter what your numerical grade is, if you get an F, it's a 0. And then you end up averaging it over the end of the year, and you could come up to, whether that's 2.25 or 2.75, depending on what that is, you'll get that grade, and it'll equate to A, B, C, D, or E, or F. E, wow, that's going back to the 80s. Sorry, that's going back to the 80s. So I think we have some discretion there, especially since other districts are doing it. But again, that remains to be seen if that discretion survives the latest round of State Board of Education rulemaking.
Superintendent.
Thank you. And I believe the changes are for weighted, right? The accelerated classes, and the board has had conversation about that. So a couple of points. First, I was very good at algebra, and I love geometry. I can still do postulates, theorems, love all that. I can still remember it.
That explains so much. So much it explains.
All right. So I want to address just a couple of things, and I have a question. On the transcripts, do we have numerical grades, or is it A, B, C, D?
They're letter grades.
They're letter grades, right? So that, again, for those teachers that are looking for like the 42 to be reflected, that's not reflected on the transcript, A, B, C, D, or F. And I certainly would love to engage in conversation with CTA, have teachers come in to discuss changing over, and really it could be as simple as what we're doing right now, that they can input their grades, and currently they can give the 0 for individual assignments. What happens, and correct me if I'm wrong because it's been a couple of years since I was CAO, what happens is when they do the final average, the system then, if it's anything below a 50, then it reverts it to a 50. But the grades in Skyward, that the individual do reflect if the child has not turned something in, they've given them a 0. There are so many inconsistencies. Board member Salamanca triggered one. So we've had conversations about this. So we have teachers that doesn't matter what they do during the class, let's say for an AP class, but if they pass the AP exam, they will give them the grade that's associated with it. So if they get a 5, they get an A. If they get a 4, they give them a B, regardless of what they did during the class. And that one could say that is mastery learning. I don't know, because it's been many, many moons since I delved into sample AP questions. But the reality is that we will not be able, because first of all, the teachers have that right, to assign grades. We won't be able to come up with a system that is perfect, not even near perfect. I think the closest we can come, if the board wants us to delve into that, is the 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 system, because that is equitable. The range is the same. With your example, they still would get, I think if you average out the 4 and all the zeros, they still end up with a D. And I think we also need to do a little bit more in analyzing students' test grades, how they're progressing, and the supports that they're getting. I think that may be a way that AI can help us. I'm not asking teachers to do it, but it may be something that we could have some of our support staff, resource teachers, or even admin really delve into those students that have not passed or are barely passing, and then do an analysis. Some of the students, I remember when I was a principal, they had test anxiety. And so they knew the content, but when you put them in front of an exam, they just kind of blanked out. I also had a child that would do that. And so it's very frustrating as a parent. And my last point, and I don't know that these statistics have changed, and I know that you have received emails. I probably would say, how many emails have you received with teachers who are dissatisfied with the system? Because when we looked at a shift, it was split 50-50. So changing it, let's say, to where you do give zeros, then you're going to have about half of the teachers who are not happy with that. So there isn't an overwhelming majority that, especially if it's being done the way that we are, that we've expected them to do it, that they can give the zeros, because there are still some teachers that think on the individual assignments, no, I can't give a 0. And I say, no, you can give the zeros on those individual assignments. And so I think we need to do a better job also of educating or making sure our teachers know that they can give those zeros as part of their individual assignments. It's just at the end of the quarter where it will revert to a 50 if it's anything below that. So thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm up next. I think it'll be interesting to see what the state comes back with, because obviously that kind of ties our hands a little bit. But it is really hard, because you have, I think, mastery tends to not necessarily always align with grades, and grades don't necessarily always align with standardized testing, and standardized testing definitely doesn't align. Like it's three different things that you're measuring for. And so I understand the importance of teachers having discretion and freedom to grade and assign and decide what that looks like. It really is, this tool is kind of the only one we have at the board level on that. I guess one of the questions I had was on when we see a student that just gets a 0 for the quarter like this, do we have a process in place where we're checking in on this? Let's say this is a high school student, right? So like maybe they have multiple classes where they're starting to get zeros. Like, is anyone checking in on them? Is it up to the teachers to kind of individually reach out? Back in my day, I don't remember anyone. Like, different teachers will have a different approach to asking or not. And that being said, every kid is different. Even if things are like hard at home, some kids are like, I'm fine. Leave me alone. So not to say that even if a teacher reaches out, but like, are we doing any interventions at the high school level when we see this behavior?
Yes, at the high school level, yes. The guidance counselor, the school counselors do look at grades. They try to keep up with them. We also have, of course, for kindergarten through 8th grade, the early warning system that we use for students who are below grade level or performing, like getting an F in a course, especially ELA and math. In addition to that, when we come to high school students, of course, they have charts and data that they look at all the time, because the ultimate goal is for them to graduate. So if they're getting those zeros, then somebody's reaching out to them. That also includes progress monitoring for our elementary students as well. So yes, the answer is yes, someone is trying to reach out to them and help them to succeed.
Got it.
And I can attest to that.
Yeah. I think, and you know, it's not that I completely dismiss some of the stuff. Like I get a lot of feedback also, as Member Bird said, from, call it industry folks who want to hire CPS grads, and there's concerns around, hey, are you guys just graduating at everyone? And there is, I think, this general sense of maybe unfairness on, we're really, and it's not OCPS unique, I think across the state, every district, you know, we want good graduation rates. But I think sometimes that number ends up being this not very fair proxy for our students actually ready. And I know it seems like graduation is different than mastery, which is different than grades, which is different than standardized testing. And that's a much larger problem that we have with the system. But I get those concerns. I don't think a lot of the concerns we get on fairness, like all this stuff, are necessarily addressed with this policy. I think it's such a much bigger issue. I think this policy is like one small thing where the conversation and all the feelings and the disagreement really boils up is when we talk about this 50% calculation. But I think the concerns that folks have is a little bit more broader on, are students ready and prepared, and do the test scores mean what they mean? Do the grades mean what they mean? And I think that's a much harder conversation that absolutely will leave to the experts in the room on academics on this. But I think that's just the kind of emails I get. I definitely get some from teachers saying it's not fair. I think they'll get frustrated with maybe a student or two that just got that grade. I don't get a lot of emails, honestly, about this as much, sometimes from parents. And sometimes from students. I definitely get some of the students like, it's not fair, like this person didn't do anything. And I always tell them, just like, why are you worrying about other people? Worry about yourself. Like, worry about your grade, worry about your life, your career, your graduation. Like, there's no benefit to you worrying about somebody else's grade. Like, you don't know their journey or what they're going through. So I think it's a difficult one, but it sounds like maybe, and I'll leave it to the board because I want to make sure that we do get staff what they need from the board today. We might get some guidance from the state additionally that will impact this. So this might be something we definitely absolutely come back to. We come back to this every year, so next year we'll come back. But
one more comment. Mr. Bixler had a great comment. I'm sorry, Dr. Bixler had a great suggestion, and we'll go back and noodle it, but this could be the topic for my teacher advisory committee for next year, where we bring in all of our we invite all the teachers of the year to come. I also know that CTA is invited to attend those, so this may be an avenue to at least start those conversations and maybe get a better idea of where we stand from a smaller group.
Yeah, I think the intention of the board is not to hurt the students who are hurting the most, but I think I also hear Member Farron's concern, right? There are some students that maybe they have the capacity to get in the 90s, and maybe they are happy with a couple C's the rest of the quarter, and I think that's where the skill building is. I'm not sure that our systems might catch those students that are cruising at C's, because sometimes C's get degrees, right? That I don't know that flags our system on that, but it is a concern of I don't know that a student that got a 90 and then gets C's is learning a life skill, so not sure that this catches that either. Member Byrd. C's got degrees, it is.
I absolutely love that. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm not going to belabor it, but I was just running some numbers in this scenario on this 50% calculation, and because I started thinking, okay, to get a 0 in a whole quarter, that would mean just not doing anything, not even turning in one assignment or writing one paper or. Okay. Okay. For an entire quarter, though. That just seems like a lot. So I started running some numbers and they're plugging in some other numbers. Instead of 0, what could they get that quarter and still end up passing for the year? And I figured they could even just get 15%. If they got the 72 and then they got a 15% that second quarter, which is still an F, and they get a 76 and an 80, they end up with a 60% average. So they get a D. So they still passed the course. They did fail a quarter, but they got 15%. I mean, we're talking maybe one homework assignment. I don't know. I don't know what you would have to do to get a 15%. But so it's not, what I'm trying to say is it's not, you can dig yourself out. So I don't know that I think that this is a very fair analysis. I still think that we can have a little bit higher standard there. A 15%, a 20% gets them a 62 average. A 25% gets them a 63 average. So I think they can still have a rough quarter with personal things going on and still be able to pass a course. I don't think it's as fatal as it looks in this scenario. So I'm still, obviously, if the board wants to move ahead with the 50%, that's fine. I'm leaning more towards in favor of not having this policy anymore, but that's just me. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have anyone else queued up, but I want to make sure staff and superintendent get what they need from this board at this point. So I'm not sure we have that. Yeah.
We need the majority, what the majority would like as it relates to this current language.
Mm-hmm.
We will, for this upcoming school year, start to have conversations about the possibility of reverting to a 0 through 4 scale. But for the purpose of this policy, we need to know what the majority of the board feels as it relates to this language.
Okay, so just to make it clear to the board, so it will be keep as is, which is there is that 50% in replacement of the 0, which is what we've had. So keep as is, or if we want to get rid of that 50%. I'm okay with keeping as is, having staff look into the 0 to 4 and seeing what state comes back to. This is a policy we revisit every single year, so I feel good about it. The proposed language, right? Can you pull up the proposed language things just so folks know what we're looking at?
Yes, so
I know
we
it's one of the
actually
slides.
had a board member ask if we could clarify the language a little bit better, so I have different language I was going to propose today if you decide to go forward with the 50% rule that explains that a teacher has individualized discretion on assignments. So do you want me to read that?
Yeah, that would be great. So if the board members just keep it, we won't look at it, but just going to read it.
Sure. So it would be a teacher may issue grades on individual classroom assignments or assessments using the 0 to 110 percent grading scale referenced below, and it'll be a grading scale on the SPP. However, even if the student's average based on these individual assignment or assessments is lower than 50%, the student's posted grade, which will be maintained on the student's official record, will not be lower than 50% for the following grading periods. And then it lists the grading period. So it's saying the same thing, but it's just trying to clarify that a little
Clarify
bit.
that a teacher can make a 0 on an assignment?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so we have so I'm clear that I'm good with keeping the policy. What you just read to me works for me. I'm okay with that language. Member Front?
I would like to remove the 50%.
Okay. Member Vanos?
I would like to keep it as is.
Member Douglas? Okay. And Member Byrd, your last comment was change it? Okay. Member?
I'd like to keep it as it is.
Okay, so I think, do we have, okay, Member Gallo?
Hi, I would like to keep it as is as long as we continue to have the conversations with the union and the teachers
Yep.
so that we could come to a good conclusion. Thanks.
Okay, so I think we have majority on keep as is the language that is being proposed. And then I think the board absolutely wants to revisit this and keep that conversation open.
Keep that conversation on.
All right. Back to staff.
Okay, so that I think is going to be the biggest discussion we have today. But just to go to the policy itself, there aren't any substantive changes besides adding the term handbook to the policy, and that's just to differentiate between the policy and the handbook, but nothing in statute changed that would modify our current policy. And then, so to get to the plan, and before we go through the changes, I just wanted to ask the board how you would like us to proceed. We can pause after every section, or do you just want us to go through and then you can ask us your questions at the end?
So I believe every board member has had one-on-one time with you where we went one by one. It is an extensive document. Board, do we have a preference on how much in depth we go? Are there specific topics? So what are our options? So it's just go through the changes.
Correct.
Remind me how long this is.
So it's an 88-page document, but we're only going over the substantive changes. We're going to breeze past the terminology and grammatical edits and things like that.
So why don't we just go through, the substantive changes only, because the board did have one-on-one time, and I do remember that was a very long meeting. As a one-on-one, so.
We're going to try to go as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
So as you'll see, when we go through, you'll see comments next to each substantive change that was done. So we may breeze past some of those red line changes, but again, those are just going to be rewording, typos, formatting edits that don't change the substance of what's written there. So when you see a comment, that's going to be a substantive change. The SPP does include, as I said earlier, input from staff as well as legislative changes, and then those formatting and grammatical edits. The non-discrimination statement was updated to align with the current non-discrimination statement. And then the table of contents will be updated once the policy and handbook are adopted by the board. The introduction here is, again, just what I went over in the policy, adding the term handbook throughout the SPP, so this differentiates between this and the policy. This is that 50% rule that we just discussed, so we're going to update the language here to what I read out loud. And I'm going to turn over to Ms. Owens to continue with the changes.
On page 10, we do have updated language that we have a placeholder for the proposed rule that requires the State Board of Education to adopt a uniform grading scale for our honors and accelerated courses. So this is a placeholder. When the rule is adopted, we will add the language from the rule. On page 11, we've added pre-AP biology as an EOC assessment course. And at the bottom of page 11, we also have a couple of changes for computer adaptive assessments. If the score is invalidated due to teacher misconduct, the district must contact DOE to determine if the specific situation warrants a retest. If it does, the student may restart the test and complete the test on makeup day. And then also we have an additional change here, or updated language about students who will take virtual school courses that have an EOC assessment must successfully complete both the course and the EOC assessment in order to earn a final grade and course credit. On page 13, we have updated language for the common final exams. Before we had associated this to the EOC crosswalk, and that was incorrect. These are common final exams, so therefore, if a CFE is invalidated for student behavior, or if the student does not take the CFE score will be entered as a 59%, which corresponds to the CFE crosswalk. We also have updated language here for statute. If a student earns a credit in ELA English 2 or English 3 from a transferring entity, they must take the EOC in order to earn a high school diploma. On page 15, we have a couple of changes. Basically, we wanted to make sure that we have updated the language on statute where pre-K students must also take the FAST early literacy. And the other change we have is now the assessment for our ELL students has changed from Accel for ELLs to WIDA Access. On page 16, we have a few changes where we have at the top of the page, we added the word plans. So this is to make sure that this is not confused with progress monitoring assessments. And then we also updated the language so that to match with the statute when it comes to students who have a substantial reading or math deficiency. And we have additional criteria that we added based on the progress monitoring plan, where a description of the specific measures that will be used to evaluate and monitor the student's reading or mathematic process is a criteria used for the progress monitoring plan. Page 19, we added the title College Board just to make sure that everyone understood that advanced placement is with College Board advanced placement curriculum and program. Then on page 20, we have a few changes. With Cambridge, we changed essay-based to written examinations. And we also have where middle school students have the opportunity to participate in the Cambridge Lower Secondary program for select Cambridge Upper Secondary courses. That has been changed. And then we updated the language at the bottom of page 20 where the CLEP is now available. It is available for all students and not just dual enrollment students. On page 21, we have at the top updated language based on the House Bill 1279, which states that home education students must reside in Florida to participate in post-secondary coursework, and also post-secondary schools must also be Florida public post-secondary institutions, and they also should be eligible not-for-profit independent colleges and universities that can participate in the dual enrollment program. On page 23, we have updated our magnet school opportunities. We do have a few schools who will no longer be magnets. You see one here for elementary, and then we have several on page 24 for our high school magnets that will no longer be in place. On page 25, we have added a section for Scholastic Academy opportunities for the 26-27 school year. Scholastic Academies are specialized educational pathways that offer OCPS students unique learning opportunities focused on specific themes, and they are listed here for elementary, middle, and high. On page 26, we have a few updates. We changed the title of Orange County Virtual School and Florida Virtual School. We updated the title to Virtual Courses and Assessments. This aligns with virtual instructional programs that we have at the top. And then we also added clarification about virtual school students that if they want credit for a course that has a requisite statewide standardized assessment, they must take it and pass in order to gain credit. And section 2 is for Ms. Kopesky for students with disabilities.
Okay. So under this section, the waiver of the statewide standardized assessments for students with disabilities, we had a recommendation from Research and Management. The way it was written made it sound like we could waive the student actually taking the test, but that's not the case. They actually have to take the test and then we can waive their results. So we modified the language here so that was clearer for parents. And then on page 30, it's going to be 30 in the top of 31, but we updated this section on access points curriculum to align with the State Board of Education rule, which was adopted on September 23rd of 2025, which would have been after the current SPP was adopted. So this is just aligning with those requirements. Same thing here, the footnote would be updated at the bottom. And then we also added a reference to high school diploma requirements and a hyperlink to that section here as well. And then down here for the deferral of receipt of the standard diploma for students with disabilities, they obviously have to meet all requirements to earn a standard high school diploma. That was not listed before, but we wanted to make sure that that was clear for parents and students.
Okay, on page 34, we are discussing the section on English language learners. We made a few changes based on statute. We changed the assessment that is used for our ELL students, as mentioned earlier, from Access for ELLs to WIDA Access. And then we also added staff to ensure there is a cohesive plan for monitoring academic progress for our ELL students. So we added the MTSS coordinator and the staffing specialist for this. We also added the term as feasible. When it comes to our documentation, we want to provide our I'm drawing a blank here, our parents all the documentation that we have for our ELL students as much as we can. So we wanted to provide as much possible documentation as possible to give, I'm going blank on this one, I'm sorry.
So I'll help out Ms. Owens on this one. We try to give parents all documents in their home language, but obviously there are thousands and thousands of home languages, so we added as feasible because we're going to do the best we can to give it to them in their home language. Sometimes it's just not possible.
At the top of page 35, we updated the language about promotion and retention for our ELL students to align with statute, including adding U.S. school for due state, which is the initial date of entry into a U.S. school. We also added a comment about making all of our documents as comprehensible as possible to meet the needs of our English language learners. On page 36, we actually removed the paragraph that's in the middle of page 36, and we added it as an additional pathway for our ELL students. This pathway states for students who transfer to OCPS in high school, students may receive immersion English language instruction during the summer following their senior year and retake the grade 10 ELA statewide standardized assessment. We also added information about, on the top of page 37, an additional section for our part-time students. So we have here, the section is to inform our parents and students of the ability to enroll in courses on a part-time basis if their child is in a private school, home education program, or private tutoring program. And if they want to take these courses, they are allowed to. We do receive FTE for these courses. For those students who are in a personalized education program, they would pay to take these courses on our school sites. At the middle of page 37, we do have a line about home education students enrolling in our OCPS Flex for their academic curriculum needs. On page 39, we added one bullet when it comes to our homeschool students. If they wish to participate in official class rank for their senior year, they must enroll in an OCPS school for the second semester of their junior year and for their entire senior year in order to qualify for class rank. For the second bullet that's at the bottom of page 39, we just clarified the language. This has to do with students, homeschool students who want to participate in graduation activities and receive a high school diploma and transcripts. They must meet all graduation requirements and be enrolled with OCPS for the student's entire senior year. We also added a line where it says requests involving unique or extenuating circumstances require approval from the Chief Academic Office. At the top, I missed one bullet at the very top when it comes to our home education students based on Senate Bill 538, that they can participate not only in interscholastic extracurricular activities, they can also do intrascholastic extracurricular activities. At the bottom of page 39, we have the Department of Juvenile Justice. Here we added updated language based on the rule. At the bottom, DJJ students will be notified of the high school equivalency program. And also on page 40, basically a lot of this language is updated based on the rule, and it has to do with students transitioning from their transition from entry into the program and exiting the program. All on page 40. And then we can move to elementary. Elementary is on page 43. We updated this chart to reflect the current instructional minutes for each of our subject areas to align with our agreement with CTA when it comes to teacher lunch times, which are now 30 minutes. So we updated the subject areas for these minutes. We also provided an opportunity for social studies to be taught in our ELA classrooms to give teachers more flexibility in instruction. This also includes health being taught in any core subject that the teachers feel is valid, because health definitely it covers our resiliency standards. So that can be incorporated in any of our core subject areas. On page 44, we added we made a clarification to language. Since we just proposed the reading and math intervention courses, we wanted to make sure that it is provided to students based on what we provided in the handbook. And then on page 45, we have, based on House Bill 1279, the New World's Reading Initiative, which can be provided to students who are deficient in reading and math. And that's on page 45 and also on page 47 as well.
Okay, so from there, we are going to skip to high school because there are no changes for middle school. Give me just a second to scroll there. And under the high school section, we updated the chart. The current SPP has this two separate charts. So one for students who entered grade 9 prior to the 23-24 school year, and then one for students who entered grade 9 23-24 and thereafter. The only difference in the two charts was going to be the electives and then the personal literacy, make sure I get that right, the personal financial literacy half credit that they're required to have. So instead of having two separate charts with essentially the same information, we condensed it to one and then just notated that difference in the chart itself. Up here you'll see that we changed the fine arts, performing arts, speech and debate, career and technical education as recommended by academic services. We also updated the marching band where it says completion of 2 years of marching band shall satisfy the 1 credit requirement in physical education and the 1 credit requirement in performing arts. This was changed by House Bill 1279 and House Bill 453. Before the and, it was an or, so you could only use your marching band for either physical education or performing arts, and so now you can use it for both, which is exciting for our marching band kiddos. And then also down here, we have an update where if a student takes a dance techniques course, where a significant component of the activities are designed to maintain or improve health-related fitness and lifelong fitness, that can satisfy 1 credit in physical education or 1 credit in performing arts. So that information was added to both this section of performing arts as well as the section on physical education. We also added the participation in health opportunities through physical education satisfies the physical education requirement, as that is the program that we use in OCPS. And I want to say there was one more. Yes. So we also added under the physical education section the completion of the 1 year in Special Olympics as determined by the student's IEP also satisfies the 1 credit requirement in physical education. So that was updated by House Bill 453. So we had a couple of changes to high school graduation requirements that we tried to capture here. And then this is where the changes in the elective section. So if you entered grade 9 prior to the 23-24 school year, you're required to have 8 electives. If you entered 2023-24 and after, you're required to have 7.5 elective credits plus a half credit in personal financial literacy. Down here, we changed this. Eligible courses are specified in the Florida course code directory. We updated it to the OCPS course code directory because we have our own. And then this is that chart I mentioned that we removed, condensing it into one. But we did get rid of one chart and added one. So we added a chart for our students who are on access points. Since they're on a different curriculum pathway, they now also have a chart where they can go and figure out how they meet their requirements in order to get a high school diploma. And then the same updates, the marching band, the Special Olympics, the dance technique courses were also added here as well, as they may participate in those. And Ms. Owens, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. So on page 61, we have a placeholder here for the rule that may be adopted when it comes to additional assessments that can be used for concordant and comparative scores. And then also in the chart, we have added PSAT and pre-ACT for concordant and comparative scores for grade 10 ELA concordant and Algebra 1 EOC comparative scores. Okay, page 64. On page 64, we removed the line that was under the chart and added it here where for students who enter in grade 9 for the 23-24 school year and thereafter, a 1/2 credit in financial literacy may be included in the 2 credits of electives. And then on page 65, we just clarified how a student can earn the Florida Seal of Biliteracy. They first need to earn a standard high school diploma and then meet one of the 3 of the following requirements that are listed here. On page 66, this actually we had included in our SPP in the 25-26 school year. This was prior to the state providing options for students who did not earn a standard high school diploma. When we met with you and the board last year, we wanted to add additional options for students who did not earn the high school diploma. We had everything in there except when, of course, the rule did come out, we missed one thing, and that was participating in an apprenticeship program. On page 67, we just updated provided clarification about class rank and homeschool students. Here again, it is to participate in an official class rank for their senior year. The homeschool student must participate and be enrolled in second semester of their junior year and for their entire senior year with an OCPS school. And then on page 68, we have the same requirement about participating in graduation activities for homeschool students, that they must be enrolled in an OCPS school for their entire senior year. Page 70. We wanted to add information about Division III NCAA requirements. We had Division I and Division II, but we did not have Division III, so we added updated information about Division III NCAA requirements at the bottom of page 70. And then on the bottom of page 71, we provided clarification about Bright Future scholarships. The student must complete the required number of approved volunteer and/or paid work hours for their specific Bright Future scholarship, and those hours must be properly documented. Okay. And we move to adult basic education. You will see some changes here because what we found out is that once we talked to CTE, we have merged two programs into one, basically. So we have career certificates that any student can take anytime. However, the focus should be on adult basic education, and so we have removed language that talks about career certificates and just focused on adult basic education. So you'll see on page 74 that we updated the language to make sure that we are following the rule for eligibility and also what the adult basic education program is. And then on page 75, we removed the language that talked about career certificate programs. At the bottom of page 75, there's clarification of the GED preparation program for students. At the top of page 76, again, we just updated it to align with rules and statutes, and here we have, of course, the General Education Development Program, who qualifies for it, and the requirements. That's updated language. And then at the bottom of page 77, we updated the language about our adult English speakers of other languages to match statutes and rules. Bottom of page 78, we removed anything that was not part of the statute or rule for the Comprehensive Adult Student Assessment System. And now we are at the appendices. So at the appendices, it really mirrors what we have in the handbook, and that is, of course, updating the elementary magnet programs, those that we have now and those that needed clarification. And then also when it comes to, and we did that for elementary, middle, and high. And then we added, of course, our Scholastic Academy programs in the appendices as well, providing descriptions of each Scholastic Academy. And that is the end of the handbook.
All right, thank you so much. General Counsel, I have you queued up, but I'm not sure if that's okay.
That's queuing up for Member Gallo.
Okay, Member Gallo.
Hi, I have a question, and it was, I think, one that's embedded in our progression plan. When I met with them individually, we were talking about the CFEs and how if you don't sit for the CFE, you receive, I think, 69% on the exam. Is that accurate?
For CFEs, it's 59%.
59%. So that is still embedded in the progression plan?
That is correct, yes.
I don't know if now's the time, but I would like to discuss this. I think that this is along the lines of the 50% that we were discussing earlier. If someone does not sit for an exam, I'm confused on how they're going to get a 59% on that exam.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go, you, okay.
Sorry, Member Gallo. My speaker. So I believe this has been in place for a while because this was in our student progression plan when I started assisting the team with it. But I believe it was added to align with what the Florida Department of Education does with the EOCs. So with the EOC, if you don't sit for it or it's invalidated for misconduct, you get an automatic, I believe it's a 69, whereas our CFE is lower, so it's a 59.
So just so that I'm understanding, if a child does not sit or does not do well on the CFE, it automatically gets they automatically get a 59%. Is that accurate?
Member Gallo, let me make one clarification, please. So for a state test, if they don't sit for the state test, then they will have to sit for it before they get a final grade. So it is not a 69% that they receive. So just for clarification purposes, I wanted to bring that to light.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I still have a concern about
Yes.
the 59%, and I understand that we do makeups for the CFEs. I just am confused on how we would give a student a 59% on an exam that they didn't take. Like, why wouldn't they get a 0 or at the very least a 50%, which falls in line with our grading system?
Well, there's no answer for you. That is certainly something that can be looked at. As they stated, this has been in place for quite a number of years. So if it is the will of the board to change it to a different number, we absolutely can do that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vasquez. I definitely want to look into that. And again, I'm not a big fan of the CFEs. I've made that very clear on multiple occasions, but I'm also not a fan of giving an exam and then automatically giving a 59%, which is, I know it's still failing, but they usually, the exams, the CFEs are usually not rounded off, but they're averaged out in a class. So that could even bump that 59% higher based on the class average. And so I'm just concerned that students will get a passing grade on an exam that they never took.
Understood. And as you know, we did do a survey regarding the CFEs, seeing if there was interest in eliminating CFEs and using the overall grade, and that was not met favorably overall. And then when they looked at it, elementary versus secondary, there was more interest in elementary than at the secondary level. So that is something that next year we would want to have conversations with CTA to see if that is a change that we can make. But overall, there was the majority did not want to change, and their rationale makes sense. They have their content area, and they do not want a math score or the overall ELA score of the school to determine what their raise would be for performance pay.
If I could just add just two things that may clarify or may not. The 59%, it was because of VAM, we wanted to make sure that how important it was for the students to take the test, but then we wanted there to be a test score there for the teachers. Is that correct? And then I think the 59 came in on the EOC. If you take the EOC and receive a 1, it is a 69. So the lowest score you get on the EOC if you take it is a 69. So I think that's where some of that reasoning was. I'm not sure if it was good reasoning, but it was reasoning.
I mean, that's great clarification because if we didn't do that, then it would impact the teacher's score. And so that is very helpful to the conversation. So we may want to revisit. I don't know if you'll remember Gallo has a change.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez, and I really appreciate the clarification. It's absolutely not my intent to hurt teachers in any way. I do have a follow-up question. What percentage of the CFE is the child's grade? So is it like 10%, 20%, 30%? I know the EOCs from the state, I think, account for 30% of their grade. What do the CFEs account for?
The CFEs count for 20% of the final grade.
So there's my second issue is that if it's 20% of their grade and they're not sitting for the exam and they're automatically getting the 59% and that's averaged up, then once again, we're kind of inflating their grades, we're inflating everything. And so I do have concern about that. So if we can continue this conversation about that piece of the progression plan, I would really appreciate it.
We absolutely can, but again, in that example, it would then negatively impact the teacher. So we'll dig into a little bit more, look at some different scenarios. Jennifer Sasser will work in conjunction with student services on that, and we'll provide more information to the board at a later date.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Vanos. Member Gallo. Apologize, I was looking at Vanos as I was reading this. Member Fraun, you're up next.
Thank you. My question is just on the new requirement for the half credit for financial literacy. How are we providing that class for our students? Is that something that they'll receive in person at school, or is it online?
That is correct. It is in person at school. It's one of their requirements.
Perfect. I guess we've probably already picked a curriculum or something, as it's just I want to plug in. I'd love to see the Dave Ramsey course. It is an approved course through the state of Florida, but awesome skills. And a lot of students I've spoken with who have graduated have told me some things that they wish they had learned in school were those, just like the financial literacy kind of common sense things of how to save, how can I help my family really progress, how could I buy a house, how could I make money and, kind of double your finances and get some good return on investment. And I think that's something that Dave Ramsey course provides.
Do we have any? No?
We will look into that. Typically, we have our curriculum resource materials that for every standard then has content or it has curriculum that can be used. And so we can certainly look at the possibility of adding that. And I'm assuming it's not going to cost us any more money because, we're trying to streamline and save every penny. But I see our CAO is, if you're trying to text, why don't you just come to the microphone because I'm not reading my text right now.
Good afternoon, Board. We're currently using McGraw-Hill, which is a state-adopted text for our financial literacy coursework.
Okay. Up next, Member Vanos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have well, first, I guess I'll go to the CFE conversation. I share a lot of Member Gallo's concerns. Also because I don't think some of these CFEs are even evaluating what students are learning in the class. For example, in a guitar CFE, one of the questions was, why do countries have national anthems? So I think I understand that some teachers are concerned that their evaluation will be impacted because of the CFE, but the way that it works now with the 59%, with the huge curve and added in, with the questions that are not relevant to the course, it's a pretty, I would say, not great evaluation tool in and of itself. So I hope that we can work towards finding a better one that really reflects what is being taught and is fair to everyone involved. This was, and then I had another question that I received from a parent that I just want to make sure I fully understand. And it wasn't one of the highlighted sections, but it is with respect to the math progression in middle school. And the question is, if a child decides to skip 6th grade math and move right into 7th grade advanced so that they can take geometry in 8th grade. I'm not saying I condone this. I made the mistake of allowing one of my children to do this, and it was a huge mistake. But if someone does make that decision, my question is, are they required to take 6th grade math on OCPS or virtually?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. Sorry. If you have a 5th grader going into middle school, one of the things you can do is like to skip 6th grade math essentially, and in 6th grade you would take 7th grade advanced, so that you could sort of be, taking geometry in 8th grade. So my question is, if you choose that option, parents have gotten inconsistent responses about whether a student has to somehow make up that 6th grade math on virtually, let's just say virtually, over the summer before 6th grade starts.
I don't believe that it is a requirement to take the course, because the requirement lies within the number of credits that you accumulate. It is it might be, I'm pretty sure we recommend that because there are some concepts in that course that if a child hasn't been exposed to it could present a problem when they take the next level course. So we can certainly work on our communication to ensure that parents know it's not a requirement. And based on their child's math ability, they may want to consider having them take it over the summer or not.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I think it's just the communication piece that's not being communicated clearly to everybody. So thank you for that. You mentioned in the progression plan something about the pre-ACE classes. Is that in middle school? Is that in any middle school has that option, or just certain ones? I'm sorry, I don't have a hard copy in front of me, so I'm not sure what page it's on.
So it would be for the middle schools that offer Cambridge currently. So not every middle school offers Cambridge, but if they do offer the middle school Cambridge, they can also offer that, and I don't know the terminology. So they can also take the high school Cambridge course in middle school now, I believe is what it's saying. Can you scoot it up to, it was ACE, it was one more page. Right there, yeah. So the middle school students also have the opportunity to participate in the Cambridge Lower Secondary Program, which is a middle school program, for select Cambridge Upper Secondary courses. Is that correct? Okay. So it would be the middle schools that offer Cambridge courses, they can also offer the upper secondary courses as well.
Okay, and how does a school get to be able to offer those?
We looked at feeder patterns of the high schools that offer the ACE program.
Okay, so if your high school offers it, then you would put the Cambridge in that middle school?
Yep.
But don't all high schools offer it?
Do you want to come up there?
So we looked at feeder patterns when we placed them into the middle schools, and then we're allotted so many slots because it's a waiver that we receive from Cambridge for middle school. So usually there's a cost for each middle school, so we're allotted so many waivers, so we were able to place it into a select number of middle schools without a charge. And when we placed them, we looked at feeder patterns to see what the community wanted and how we can give opportunities to maximize students, the offerings.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by feeder patterns?
So what feeds into the high school? So first of all, if the school has high school, and then how many waivers we had that we could offer it at the middle school level. So 100% of the middle schools that feed into Cambridge High School wouldn't necessarily have Cambridge. But there would be Cambridge at a school that fed into a high school that had Cambridge. Now, this was before we offered Cambridge at all of the high schools, but then we looked at the feeder patterns across to offer as many Cambridge programs as we could in the middle school, looked at would there be a pre-IB or an MYP program? And then we looked at kind of those offerings, which ended up being Roberto Clemente, where we left from a cost standpoint. And then looking at the pre-AP programs, if there was AP as well at the high schools.
At the high schools, okay, because there's not because we don't have pre-IB in middle schools anymore.
We just have it at Roberto Clemente now.
Okay, and pre-AP we have at some middle schools too?
I believe we have it at Maitland Middle, and we might have had it at Union Park, but I'd have to go check to see exactly. But we started some pre-AP classes as well.
Okay, so it sounds like you're just sort of experimenting in the middle schools with all different sorts of things, maybe to see, and depending on what high schools they go to, if there's IB there or...
Yeah, we wanted to have different offerings, and when originally it came about, there was just MYP, which is the pre-IB program, was offered at the 5 schools. And then some other schools were looking for opportunities and what else could we offer, and we started with a Cambridge Magnet. So as we added, we kind of systematically looked at, okay, what would make sense in this community? What is the principal, or what are they asking for? How could we keep costs down for the middle schools, because some were having costs that exceeded their budgets. And looking at all those approaches to make sure they had those opportunities. All the programs that I mentioned prepare the student for kind of that secondary, post-secondary experience when they enter high school, and kind of give them a taste of those programs where they can have some success.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, may I? If there is a particular middle school that would like us to explore that offering, we'd be happy to look into it and the associated cost with adding them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, the next question that I had, and I did bring this up during my conversation, but I'm going to bring it up again, about the class rank for homeschoolers. I mean, at a minimum, I think if you're going to participate in class rank, at a minimum, you should have to be in high school for at least half the time. Because my understanding is schools have to accept transcripts of homeschool students at face value. Well, the transcripts of a homeschool student are what the parent puts down on the transcript. So I mean, if you want my opinion, I don't think we should have class rank at all, but I know that's not a popular opinion, so that's okay. But if we're going to have class rank, I think minimum half the time in high school. So is that, first of all, could we do that?
That is something that could be looked into if you want to discuss that. There's no limitation as far as in statute about class rank, about who needs to participate and how long.
Dr. Vasquez?
Yes, and I think we made changes here. Is it a year? I don't have a hard copy in front of me. So we could make the change 2 years or at least 2 years as part of that. And you are correct. We do have to accept those transcripts. And while our experience have been that some of the students at our homeschool, the transcripts to receive are accurate, they reflect how they perform in school. We also have the opposite, where we have students that are reflecting knowledge of standards, and then we are having to do a lot of remediation to have the child come up to the standards of that grade level. And so we certainly, if that's the will of the board, we can change that to be at least 2 years.
Okay.
There's no, my understanding is there's no statutory requirement.
And just for clarity, we only run class rank for juniors and seniors, so we do run it for the fall of the junior and spring of junior year and fall of senior and spring of senior year. So it is ran for 2 full years.
Okay, so I feel like that aligns better with what we do anyway. So I'm going to put it out there. If any other board members would like to discuss it further or consider it, please say if you do or don't. Okay, and then my last concern, and I did bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up again, is just the elementary, basically, is essentially getting rid of the requirement to have social studies and health. I know teachers can embed it in English or whatever, but I have concerns about this because there's such testing pressure in our schools that I worry that social studies and health essentially will not be taught. So, because they're no longer required, and teachers, to their credit, they're under pressure. They're evaluated by testing, and so I can see a teacher instead just pushing ELA and math, and that's it, because that's what they are tested on. And I think that social studies and health are both important subjects, and science. I mean, I see science has decreased too, from 4 days to 2 days, it looks like. Is that right? Yeah. So I will just put that concern out there. I think we should keep the subjects requirements as is. So thank you so much.
And if I may just state that for social studies standards, 44% of the standards are already integrated into our new ELA textbooks. The other social studies lessons are connected to our adopted textbook, which is TCI, and I do not know what that means, but okay. And these lessons are placed within the ELA CRMs, which are curriculum resource materials to integrate during ELA or to teach during the social studies time. And this is also just to provide flexibility for teachers. So teachers could opt to just have the pure social studies time if they want to.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I understand that flexibility is good, but I also think we just have some very weird incentives in the state, and I just worry about the impact that this will have. I also worry about the message that it sends about the importance of science, social studies, and health. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Vanos. I'm up next. I still get very upset when I see CFEs up here and the 20% of the grade, and I do hear from students constantly how these exams don't, like many, do not reflect at all mastery or the topic. It is usually random. There's many times where it is open book. I think majority of them are open book, and so I really, we constantly talk about how we want less testing, and this is one that I think the board has been very clear. We would love to get rid of this test, and it is a massive amount of time that it takes. Yeah.
I do need to interrupt, and we don't need to share it here, but we would need to know what schools did it open book, because that's a severe violation.
Yeah, happy to.
And there's like proctors, there's a whole process. It's just like the state assessment.
Well, it's so to be clear, to clarify, not open book during the test, more of, hey, let's go ahead of the review. It's very explicitly called the test review. It's fairly explicitly linked to the test, is what I've heard.
Okay, so again,
Yeah.
all of those would violate testing protocols, would be reported to professional standard. So we'll have a conversation offline to identify those schools.
Yeah,
because
that's absolutely.
it is that's a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general there is a lot of CFEs that are. I don't know that asking the guitar question is any more helpful than having an open book test. I think they're kind of serve the same purpose of nothing at all in terms of the learning. So I'm still very much in favor of the CFEs. I don't know that our teachers, I know we did a survey, really understood how few of them would truly be impacted in terms of the CFE by grades or salary. Like, it really is a very small number of our thousands of teachers.
Well, I don't know the exact number at the elementary, yes, because it's only for the courses that do not have a state assessment.
Right.
But when you're looking at middle and high school, it's, I think, it's a lot more because it's for every course that does not have a state assessment, you have to have a CFE.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I struggle with that. I don't know that I have a lot of good context that all of it is actually aligned with either mastery or not. And it is 20% of the grade. It does feel like giving a minimum of 59%. That feels like grade inflation to me. I mean, if a student didn't sit in a test, that's just not, doesn't quite make sense to me. I understand we don't want 20% of the grade, but the whole thing, honestly, this is one of those places where the incentives, the structure, who the benefit is for, none of it really makes sense to me. And it's been frustrating to be on this board now for 4 years, and I think every time we talk about this and we can't do anything about it. I do support Member Vano's when she was talking about the 2-year requirement for class rank, so I would be on board for that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Specifically, that's, I think when you start seeing a lot of the college admissions games start to happen, and I don't think, like, I think the purpose of class rank is for it to be actually accurate, and I think we want our district to be treated as a credible district when it comes to college admissions and all of that stuff, and it's just really hard for us to validate every single student's grade class for homeschooling. So in the spirit of fairness to the class rank, I would be very supportive of the 2-year limit. Member Byrd.
Thank you. I agree with that one. I just wanted to touch on the discussion that we had in our meeting about putting in the progression plan that students can take their virtual dual enrollment classes on campus. And I know that we've shared that information with schools, and I'm hoping that schools are being more flexible, but I think it would be really important to have in our student progression plan all the different flexibility options for parents, just because some of them just don't know, and that's one of them that I think that would be helpful to have in here. And I don't know where. I was just trying to search like where we could put it, but I am in favor of having that somewhere in the plan, just so that it's easy for parents to see. That was the only thing I had to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. I don't have anyone else queued up, so Superintendent, you're up.
I would like consensus. I love the idea of
2 years.
making it 2 years. I just want to make sure we have the majority of the board that's in favor of that, so that they can make that change.
Okay, so just to clarify before folks talk about it, it is about homeschool and the 2-year requirement before being part of the class rank. And so that's senior and junior year, specifically for homeschool students who enter OCPS those last 2 years and impact the class rank. So we'll start a member front.
And just to clarify, this is just for class rank, not necessarily that if a student wants to attend.
Just for class rank, yeah.
Homeschooled. Okay, that's fine.
Member Douglas, you okay?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Is Member Gallo still with us to say if she's okay with the 2-year from homeschool?
Yes, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, I think that we have majority. I don't see anyone else queued up, so I think, oh, member front.
Just thinking this through, do we do the same requirement if a student is coming from out of state, like for class rank? Let's say they're coming from out of country. They just came here and, they're coming their senior year from a different country. Can they participate? Because it could be different. Their grading could be different. So maybe it needs to be something where, like, overall, you need to be within OCPS schools for 2 years for your junior and senior year for all students. That way there's no question. It's just, this is what we require.
If you like to make that change, that's possible, just so you know that a student that comes in from out of the state, we look at their credits, we evaluate their credits as they are, out of the country, out of the state. If they came from North Dakota and they come in with their credits, they could possibly be part of class rank.
Yeah, I
Currently.
I would prefer it just be a blanketed, you need to participate and be actively attending an OCPS school for your junior and senior year to be involved in class rank. That way there's no discrepancies like what we're seeing right now, where it's at the state level, because there's some districts that are inflating grades and whatnot. So now they come into our schools, and if they had been attending for junior and senior year, maybe they would have a different grade. And it just seems a little more equal across the board.
Yeah, I would need to see how many students are impacted by that.
So, I think a couple of things. So, we have had situations, and I remember one at Lake Nona High School where we had the valedictorian that never took a class on campus because they transferred from California. I'm sorry, I'm not going to say too much. We don't identify, but they came from out of state and then had all dual enrollment. And so it is an issue as well, especially for students that have been attending that school, that somebody from out of state now all of a sudden just bumps them. I don't know how prevalent that is, but I do remember, because we got a lot of email traffic around it, and Carla remembers.
Yes.
So let us take a look. We have one more session, so we want to look at the numbers. Personally, I do not have an issue if we want to say that you, in order to be considered for class ranking, you have to be, part of, OCPS for at least 2 years, and so that would significantly limit anyone who just, moves in from another county within the state or outside of the state. That probably is a little bit larger number. I don't know that it's the majority. So we can come back. We'll work the numbers. And I don't believe there's anything in statute. Oh, maybe there is.
So there's two statutory references to class rank, excuse me. One is in the early graduation statute that says even if a student graduates early, they get to be included in the class rank honors and awards determinations with the student's cohort. The other is, for the purpose of class ranking, district school boards may exercise a weighted grading system. So there's nothing statutorily that prohibits the board from adopting a policy that says you have to be here 2 years in order to be eligible to be included in the class rank. The only thing that you have to make sure is that even if the student graduates early, they get to be part of class rankings.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. I think I think the board is good on right now looking at the initial language that we talked about, and then perhaps we get more data on what that is. I wouldn't, I don't know how it works with county either. Like, I know there's some districts that I wouldn't be like, you're Miami-Dade or something, like we're not going to count your stuff. So I want to be mindful of that in state, but I don't know how many. I don't know what the number of magnitude it is when we look outside of the.
We can take a look at that. The other question was, how would this impact charters? My view on that is that charter schools are part of OCPS, and so they would, if somebody transfers from a charter school to one of our schools, they would still be considered as part of the ranking because the charter school is an OCPS school. So the charter question should be fine.
I think that makes sense. Technically, it does. It is. It does indeed make sense. Okay, so I don't have anyone else queued up. If staff, anything else we have to cover here? Or questions that you need from us in the board on direction?
Yes, I just have a question of something Member Byrd mentioned about adding language to possibly the dual enrollment section, that students who are taking dual enrollment classes virtually can do that on campus. I'm getting the yes from Dr. Vasquez to add that. Is that okay?
I think we're all okay with that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, if no one has any further comments or questions, thank you to all board members and staff for your participation today, and finding no further business, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.